High school science lab safety rules. Every student should have the right knowledge of safety lab rules when getting into high school. Before anyone ever steps into a lab to do any type of work, they should be well taught on the safety lab rules that should always be followed in each and every lab assignment. Safety in the science class is the #1 priority for students and teachers. There are some general guidelines that should be followed and taught to students before using the science lab. Students must have a responsible manner at all times in the science lab. Students should follow all written and verbal instructions that the teacher gives. If an instruction is not understood, the student must know to ask the teacher before doing any activity. Students should not ever touch any equipment, chemicals, or any other materials in the science lab until they are given instructions on what or how to do so. Students should read all instructions thoroughly before entering the science lab. No playing around will ever be tolerated in the science lab. Students must be alert and proceed with caution at all times, and students must know their surroundings. They should all have a knowledge of where the safety kits and fire extinguishers are. Teachers should teach students what to do in case of any accidents. Students must follow the dress code in the science lab. These are just some general guidelines to follow in the science lab. There are 5 main rules and instructions that should be learned and followed when stepping into a science lab. The first rule to be followed is clothing. Every student must follow the dress code that the teacher provides in the science lab. Long hair, dangling jewelry, and loose or baggy clothes are a hazard in the science lab. Long hair must be tied back, and dangling jewelry and baggy clothes must be taken off or secured. Shoes must be completely cover the foot, so no sandals will be allowed on lab days. A lab coat and safety goggles will be provided and used at all times with no exceptions. The second rule would be accidents and injuries. If an accident or injury were to occur, students should report the accident or injury to the teacher immediately, no matter how bad the accident or injury may be. Students should not panic. If you or your lab partner are hurt, you should immediately tell the teacher and get their attention. If any chemical being used in the lab should splash in your eye or on your skin, you should immediately flush with running water for at least 15 minutes. The third rule is handling chemicals. All chemicals in the science lab are to be considered dangerous. Chemicals should be avoided by usage of the fingers. When making an observation, keep at least 1 foot away from the chemical. Students should always check the label on all chemicals twice before removing any of the content. Students should also only take the exact amount of any chemical that is given in the instructions. Students should never return unused chemicals to their original container, and students should never remove chemicals from their lab area. The fourth rule is handling glassware and equipment. All glassware should be thoroughly cleaned before being used in the lab. Students should never handle broken glass with their bare hands. Use a brush and a dustpan to clean any broken glass in the lab. The broken glass should be placed in a designated container that the teacher has in the science lab. Students must examine the glassware before each use. Never use dirty, chipped, or cracked glassware. If you don't know how to use a piece of equipment, make sure and ask the teacher for help immediately before use. The fifth and final rule used in the science lab is heating substances. Students will not be allowed to operate a hot plate by themselves. The use of a hot plate is only allowed when the teacher is present. When using heat or flames, this will relate to the first rule, and students will have to make sure all hair and clothes are secured. Heated glass remains hot for a long time, so they should be placed and set aside in a safe area to be allowed to cool off. Tongs and heat protective gloves are to be used at all times. Students should never look into a container that is being heated. Anything that is being used to eat should not be placed on the lab desk, and always use an insulated pad when handling hot objects. All of these rules and guidelines should and will be followed when being in a science lab environment. If not, there could be harm done to you or to others around you. Lab safety is one of the most important things students should learn and follow when getting into high school. Proper lab technique is essential to the education of a successful science. If you work with the attitude of rushing through, you will not be able to succeed in your science experiments. An interest in your work and understanding of its purpose and clear interpretation of your results are awesome factors for a good lab course. You must always assume responsibility of the safety of yourself and your neighbors.